All right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're looking at something, well, a little controversial.
Definitely sparked some debate.
Yeah, it did. We're going to be focusing on faith, performance, and how we perceive things.
Hmm.
Like, how do we interpret stuff, especially when it comes to, religion?
Right, like where's the line?
Exactly. And I think a great example of this is Will Smith's performance at the BE Awards.
Oh yeah, the one with the fire.
Yeah, the Ring of Fire.
Yeah.
And he had Kirk Franklin and Chandler Moore there. Those are some big names in Christian gospel music,
It's
right?
huge. So mixing those two worlds right there.
Totally. And his lyrics were all about, like, dancing through hell. Remember that line?
Oh yeah, when you're going through hell, do you dance? Heavy stuff.
Super intense. And the reason we're diving into this today is to look at the analysis from Nadia and EMA Johnson. They're a Christian couple who have this YouTube channel, Spirit Talks with Nadia.
I've seen it. They get right to the point.
Totally. And they had some pretty strong reactions to Smith's performance.
Yeah, no kidding. They didn't hold back.
And not at all. They
Yeah.
actually called it an example of, get this, strange fire.
Strange fire.
Yeah. And it's not just some random phrase they came up with. It comes straight from the Bible, Leviticus 10.
Ah.
Like serious theological stuff.
Okay, so we're going deep here.
Deep dive, right? So to get what they're saying, let's break down the performance itself. We've got Will Smith, who has said publicly that he isn't a Christian,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And he's in this setting that's, well, pretty much hell. Literal ring of fire. And he's singing about dancing through hell. What do you think when you first saw it?
Honestly, I was kind of blown away by the visuals. The fire was like mesmerizing. Almost didn't register the lyrics at first.
Right. It's powerful imagery.
Yeah.
But the Johnsons, they zero in on that ring of fire. They say it's way more than just a stage prop.
They see it as symbolic, huh?
Exactly. They see it as a symbol of something, well, something deeper, something they don't think God would be cool with.
Okay, I'm starting to see where they're coming from. So it's not just fire, it's like what the fire represents.
Exactly. They actually compare it to this story in Leviticus 10 about these two guys, Nadab and Abihu.
Nadab and Abihu, okay.
Yeah, they offered up what the Bible calls unauthorized fire before God.
Yeah.
And let's just say it didn't end well for them.
Whoa, serious consequences.
Yeah, so the Johnsons are basically saying the fire in Smith's performance isn't meant to represent God's holy fire,
Right, right.
Instead, they're seeing it as like evoking images of Satan and the eternal flames of hell.
So they're making a distinction between different kinds of fire.
Exactly. It's about the meaning behind it, the intent. Like, makes you wonder, does all fire mean the same thing? What about, like, the Olympic torch or birthday candles?
Good point. Is it about the fire itself or what people intend it to mean?
Right. And the Johnsons take it even further. They point out that Smith included Kirk Franklin and Chandler Moore, these well-known Christian artists.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Right. And to them, that's a big deal. They see it as mixing the sacred and the secular, like blurring the lines.
Interesting. So it's not just about the fire, it's who's involved too.
Exactly. It's like, does the presence of those Christian artists change how we're supposed to interpret the performance?
It's a good question. Does it make it okay somehow, or does it make it worse?
Right. And the Johnsons are pretty firm on this. They think there needs to be a clear separation, like godly performance over here, ungodly performance over there.
So no mixing allowed. Got it.
Exactly. And to back up their argument, they bring in a bunch of Bible verses.
Oh, this is going to be good. Hit me with those verses.
Okay, so there's Ezekiel 28.4, which talks about Satan walking amidst fiery stones.
Fiery stones. Okay.
Yeah, and Ezekiel 10.6 to 7. That one describes cherubim, these angelic beings, dwelling within fire.
So fire can be associated with good and bad.
Right. That's what makes it so tricky. And they also point out all these instructions in the Old Testament about keeping the fire burning on the altar, like in the tabernacle and the
Right,
temple.
the holy fire.
Exactly. And they contrast that with, like, the fire coming down from heaven during Solomon's temple dedication, which is seen as, God's approval.
So they're building a case piece by piece.
Totally. And they're not just sticking to the Old Testament. They bring in New Testament verses, too, to drive home their point.
Okay, lay it on me. What verses?
All right, so they reference Romans 12.1-2, that passage about offering our bodies as living sacrifices, transformed by renewed minds.
Okay, so connecting it back to worship.
Yeah, like how we're supposed to live our lives. And they also bring up Hebrews 13.15, which talks about offering sacrifices of praise to God.
So the right kind of offering directed to the right source.
Exactly. And that's what the Johnsons are concerned about. They're saying true worship needs to be directed towards God alone. Like, there's a right way and a wrong way to express these things. especially when it comes to faith. Ever feel uncomfortable with how faith was portrayed in, like, a movie?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Sometimes it feels, I don't know, almost disrespectful or exploitive.
Yeah, and do you think that connects with what the Johnsons are saying about this strange fire idea?
I think it might. Like maybe it's not just about the imagery itself, but the intent behind it.
Exactly. And they don't stop there. They even reference 2 Corinthians 6.1418. That's a passage about how light and darkness can't mix, how believers and unbelievers are fundamentally different.
Wow. Okay, they're really laying down the law here.
Yeah, they're serious about the need to keep those lines clear, the sacred and the secular. It's pretty intense, right?
It is. And we're just getting started.
I know, right? This is getting deep, folks. Stick with us as we keep unpacking this whole strange fire idea and what it means for us today.
It's like they're saying this isn't just about like bad taste.
Right. Like, oh, that was a weird performance.
Yeah, exactly. More like there's something spiritually off about it, like a spiritual battle happening on stage.
Wow. Yeah, that's heavy. And they really are urging Christians to, like, be careful.
Yeah, to be discerning about what they watch and listen to.
Exactly. Like, don't just passively take it all in.
Right. Think about it.
Exactly. They're saying that what we consume, even if it's just entertainment, can really affect us, like spiritually.
Definitely shapes our beliefs, maybe even how we act.
Right. So they're pushing for this more thoughtful approach to, pop culture.
Like being more critical.
Yeah, critical. So instead of just following trends or whatever, they want us to stop and think.
Ask ourselves tough questions.
Yeah. Like, does this line up with my faith? Is this bringing me closer to God?
Or is it pulling you away?
Exactly. They're basically giving Christians tools to, navigate this world.
Which can be tricky.
Totally. The lines between sacred and secular are getting blurrier and blurrier.
Totally. And that makes me think about, like, the role of art.
Oh, interesting.
Because on one hand, the Johnsons are saying this kind of art glorifies God, this kind doesn't.
Right, right.
But is it always that black and white?
That's a great question. What about artistic freedom? And, like, isn't art open to interpretation?
Exactly. It's not always so clear-cut.
Right. So we had this debate about, like, where do we draw the line?
Between art and something offensive.
Or sacrilegious,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to religion.
Exactly. Can you have secular art with faith elements, but not, like, distort them?
Right. Or even the opposite.
Uh-huh.
What if something's meant to be just art, but people see it as something, like, spiritual?
Even if the artist didn't mean it that way.
Yeah. It's like, how much control does the artist really have?
That is a good question.
Right. And I bet the Johnsons would say, even if the artist doesn't have an agenda, the impact of the art matters.
Oh, totally. Like those symbols, they carry weight regardless of the artist's intention.
It's like the art has a life of its own.
Yeah, and it communicates things maybe even beyond what the artist meant.
And that goes back to discernment, right?
Absolutely. Be an active participant, you know?
Don't just zone out.
Right. Think about the messages, even the subtle ones. How do they line up with your beliefs?
So they're cautioning against just passively watching or listening.
Yes. Engage. Be
Yeah.
intentional about what you let in.
So where do we go from here? The Johnsons have given us their take, but is there another side?
Oh, for sure. The Johnsons' view comes from a particular place, theologically.
Right, their understanding of Scripture.
Exactly. And it's super valuable, but other interpretations exist.
Right, like not everyone's going to agree with them. Some people might say they're too quick to label anything with fire as satanic.
Yeah, fire has lots of meanings, right?
Totally.
Oh.
You can mean purification, transformation, passion.
Neat. Divine presence, even. Not always about hellfire.
And what about Franklin and Moore? They're both, like, super outspoken about their faith.
Yeah, they make music that's deeply rooted in Christianity, so does that change things?
Totally. Some people might see it as them sharing their faith.
Reaching a wider audience.
Exactly. Maybe bridging the gap between the sacred and the secular.
Showing that faith isn't just for inside a church.
Right. Maybe they saw it as a way to connect with people who, might not be open to God otherwise.
It's like meeting them where they are.
Yeah. And of course, that has its own challenges.
Oh, for sure.
But it's a conversation worth having. How do we, as Christians, engage with the world?
In a way that's authentic to our faith, but still relevant.
That's the big question, and there's no easy answer.
It's complex. We need to be wrestling with these questions.
Seeking wisdom, being open to different views.
The Johnsons started a really important conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we each have to decide how we approach these things.
So as you're watching a movie, listening to music,
Or Looking at art, reading a book.
Anything. Take a second to reflect.
What are the messages?
How do they make you feel?
Do they match your values? Do they challenge them?
And most importantly, how does this affect my relationship with God?
So be active, not passive.
Think. Ask questions.
Seek understanding.
We're so glad you're here for this deep dive.
Keep those questions coming.
And keep exploring.
It's tricky, right? This whole idea of keeping the sacred and the secular separate.
Yeah, you've got this strange fire warning.
But then, Christian artists are taking part in a performance like this.
Right, like Franklin and Moore. It makes you think about the purpose of art.
Oh, yeah, good point. Is it always about a message?
Or can it just be expression?
Like, where does inspiration even come from?
And can artists really control how people see their work?
I mean, art is subjective, right?
Totally. What one person finds offensive, another might love.
Our experiences shape how we see things.
When the Johnsons, with their focus on strange fire, they have a specific viewpoint.
Right, a theological one. They're concerned about protecting worship.
And making sure people aren't led away from God.
But their interpretation isn't the only one out there.
Right. Other Christians might see Smith's performance differently.
And how Franklin and Moore were involved.
Some might even see it as brave.
Oh, interesting.
Stepping outside the church walls,
Engaging with a different audience.
Maybe they believe faith shouldn't be confined to one space.
Like it can be expressed in different ways.
Reaching people where they are?
Using art as a bridge, maybe?
Of course, that comes with challenges too.
Oh, definitely. But it's worth talking about.
How do we, as Christians, engage with the world authentically?
And still stay true to our faith.
That's the big question. No easy answer.
We have to wrestle with it. Seek wisdom.
Be open to other perspectives.
The Johnsons have definitely given us a lot to think about.
This conversation is important.
But in the end, we each have to figure out our own approach.
So next time you're watching something,
listening to music,
taking in any kind of art,
stop and think, what's the message?
How does it make you feel?
Does it line up with what you believe?
Or does it challenge your beliefs?
And how does it affect your relationship with God?
Don't just be a passive consumer.
Engage with it. Think critically.
Ask questions.
This has been a great deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Keep those questions coming.
And keep exploring. Until next time.